Hello everyone, my name is Tian. My presentation today is about a crowdsourced non-emergency reporting app. To put it simply, it's an app that lets citizens report non-emergency city issues on their phones, such as potholes, broken streetlights, graffiti, or litter on the street. This research focuses on one question: if a city develops such an app, will citizens be willing to use it? Furthermore, if the government wants to encourage citizen participation, should it use monetary rewards, recognition mechanisms, or emphasize civic responsibility? To address and demonstrate my points, my presentation will focus on three key terms: smart cities, UTAUT, and perceived value. In short, it will explore why smart cities need citizen participation and app use, why users accept or reject new technologies, and how different incentives influence users' assessment of the app's value. First, we need to understand why this research is relevant to smart cities. Smart cities rely not only on big data analysis and application, but also on citizen participation. Many urban problems are first noticed by residents, such as broken lights, potholes, graffiti, litter, or blocked drains. If citizens can report these problems to the city government via a mobile app, then citizens become part of building the city. They help the city identify problems faster and help the government allocate maintenance resources more effectively. However, there's a crucial point. This system is only valuable if citizens are genuinely willing to use it. If people don't open the app and submit reports, even a well-designed app won't truly help with city management. A key pain point in this paper is the often opaque reporting loop. An ideal workflow would be report first, then triage, then repair, and finally feedback. In other words, users submit issues, the city categorizes and processes them. Someone is dispatched for repair, and finally feedback is provided to the user. However, in reality, many users are unaware of what happened after submitting their issues. Users are also concerned about whether their problems are resolved and whether their data was leaked during the submission process. Therefore, the question isn't just can we build the app, but will people trust it and keep using it? If users don't see their impact, they easily feel that reporting isn't worth the time. This is why transparency and feedback visibility are crucial in this research. This research can be summarized by a core story. Incentives don't work directly. They work by increasing perceived value. Simply put, incentives change users' perceptions of the activity. For example, if users feel their contributions will be recognized or that they are helping the community, they will perceive the app as more valuable. This sense of value further influences whether they find the app useful, ultimately affecting their willingness to use it. Therefore, this research primarily asks two questions. The first is research question 1. What factors best predict behavioral intention, for example, like users' willingness to use the app? The second is which of the different incentive types, such as monetary recognition and civic duty, is most effective, and through what mechanism do they work? This is the research model used in this study. It adds trust, attitude, and perceived value to the UTAUT model, and focuses on testing whether incentives affect performance expectancy through perceived value and ultimately affect behavioral intention. Next, let's discuss the methodology. This study used a scenario-based survey experiment. Because the app hadn't officially launched yet, researchers couldn't directly observe real-world usage behavior. Therefore, they showed participants mock app screens, allowing them to imagine themselves using the reporting app. The study had 580 valid responses from participants in the Toronto and GTA areas. They were randomly assigned to 4 different incentive groups. This approach allowed for comparison of the impact of different incentive methods on user perception and intention. The endpoint of this study was behavioral intention, not actual usage. In other words, the paper investigated whether users would be willing to use the app in the future, not how many times they had actually used it. This is important because it indicates that this was a pre-deployment study, a study of user acceptance before the app's official launch. The first group is the control group, meaning there are no incentives. This group serves as a baseline to compare the effectiveness of other incentive methods. The second group is monetary incentives, which are small monetary rewards. For example, users might receive a financial reward for completing a report. The third group is recognition incentives, which are recognition mechanisms. Examples include badges, public acknowledgments, or publicity thanking contributions. The fourth group is civic duty framing, which emphasizes civic responsibility. It conveys the message not you will get money, but your participation can help make the community better. This design is important because it doesn't simply ask whether incentives are useful, but whether compares which incentives are more suitable for civic participation. This study used partial least square structural equation modeling for data analysis. This method is primarily used to test path relationships between variables. We can understand it as an analytical tool used to answer several questions. First, which factors most influence behavioral intention? Second, do different incentives increase perceived value? Third, do incentives indirectly affect intention through perceived value, performance expectancy, and attitude? An important concept here is the mediation effect. Simply put, A does not necessarily directly affect C, but rather affects C through B. In this paper, incentives do not necessarily directly affect intention, but first affect perceived value, then performance expectancy, and finally behavioral intention. The first key finding is that performance expectancy and attitude are the strongest predictors of behavioral intention. Specifically, the path coefficient from PE to BI is 0.319, and from ATT to BI is 0.294. This illustrates two of the most important user concerns. First, is the app useful? Second, how well do I feel using the app? Effort expectancy, or ease of use, also has some effect, but not as strong as PE and ATT. It influences intention more by improving attitude. Social influence has a very weak impact, with only 0.008 from SI to BI. This result is interesting because it shows that in the civic reporting scenario, users don't primarily use the app because others tell them to. Compared to peer pressure, users care more about whether they find the app useful, trustworthy, and worthwhile. Therefore, the core conclusion of this page is if cities want to increase adoption, they shouldn't just say everyone should use this app, but rather let users actually see the effects of the app. The second finding is the most significant aspect of the study. Recognition incentives were the most effective, followed by civic duty framing, while monetary incentives were the weakest. This result might seem counterintuitive, as many would assume monetary rewards would be the most effective. However, in the context of civic participation, the situation is different. Reporting city issues is essentially a pro-social behavior, contributing to the public or community good. Giving a small monetary reward might not be particularly appealing to users. Furthermore, in some cases, small monetary rewards can even lead to a crowding out effect. That is, while users initially feel they are helping the community, turning it into a small transaction might weaken the public significance. In contrast, recognition makes users feel their contributions are seen and recognized. Civic duty framing makes users feel they are helping the community. Both methods enhance the sense of purpose in participation, making them more effective than small monetary rewards. From a practical design perspective, this study offers 3 suggestions for smart city app designers. First, make the impact visible, meaning users should see the progress of their reports, such as status updates and repair progress. Second, build trust. Because users may upload locations and photos, apps should clearly explain privacy and data use. Third, lead with recognition. Cities should prioritize badges, public thanks, or community acknowledgments, rather than using small monetary rewards as the primary incentive. In short, cities need not to make their apps usable, but also make users feel that their contributions are seen and valued. In conclusion, the core finding of this study is that citizens are more likely to adopt the app when it feels effective, trustworthy, and meaningful. In other words, citizens do not use civic reporting apps simply because of rewards. They care more about whether the app is genuinely useful, trustworthy, and whether their participation is meaningful. Therefore, my final takeaway is smart city participation is not just about technology. It is about value, trust, and civic meaning. Thanks for listening.